Morning, Jamie.
Good morning, Alison.
Do you have your coffee this morning?
Oh, I have my coffee
It's really important
because
in this bonus
nobody's going to
episode,
tell me what I can drink and what I can't drink.
or how much of it we can drink.
hmm
But we have to take ourselves back 80 years and realize that there was a really big problem for everybody that likes coffee, which was coffee was getting rationed in World War II. And we've been talking about this for a while with regards to the letters, that there were rations going on behind the scenes. And we've been saying for a while, I've been saying for a while, we're going to do a bonus episode on how rationing worked in World War II and the Office of Price Administration. And so today's the day we're going to tackle the subject. So no letters today. This is completely bonus episode to give some background, because largely I'm surprised that there's not too much scholarship about the logistics of rationing in World War II. It's one of those things everybody gets. You're not allowed to buy a lot of things, even if you can afford it. But how did they make it work as a system is a completely different question, because honestly, I don't think this would work today.
I know. I think that there would definitely be black markets. There most likely was black markets then.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about this topic, and we've discussed this, we've it comes up sometimes, is that there's really not a lot of information on it.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's so interesting because it's actually pretty awful when you think about it. They're telling people that you're not allowed to purchase something.
Yep.
You can purchase things, but you only are allowed to purchase a certain amount.
Right.
And when Alison and I were discussing this, and she brought up, she's like, "This is the logistics of this
Mm-hmm. To pull this
had to
off.
be so complex and had to be
Mm-hmm.
managed."
Yeah.
And so the more that we discussed it, the more that our interest was piqued. How
Mm-hmm.
exactly did this go down?
No internet. People not making long distance calls, telegraphs being really operational, letters, and trying to control the population for the cause. And everybody, basically, the vast majority of the population has to be supportive for this to
Mhm.
work. And they did it. And it's that idea of when Americans band together and they say, we need to do this to get something done, they will do it, you know. But how long did this go on? We're going to answer those questions today about how this was happening. A lot of this is going to be based on original documentation that, fortunately, I was spending some time tracking down, and we do have documentation, which I was so happy about, and we'll get into it when we get to this part of the presentation, from Iowa, because prices could still be different across the country. There's so much that needs to be done here. And so for any young history majors that are going through college and you're looking for things to study, I can tell you right now, based on looking for documentation, there's tons of documentation on this subject, but almost no books out about the ration system, specifically the government agency that controlled it, the Office of Price Administration. So if you're looking for your PhD, your dissertation topic, this is served up on a platter to you for World War II. There's a lot of characters and things that go into this, and there's a lot of documentation out there. There's a lot, millions of documents about this. Imagine the paper trail with trying to get this going. You could probably just do even a dissertation on just a portion of the subject matter that we're going to briefly cover today. But I called this presentation, "Where Has the Coffee Gone?" Because the disaster is going to be coffee's going to get rationed, and I find that utterly reprehensible. We got to keep the coffee going. If the war is going to we're going to keep a war effort going, I would need caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
So if this were to come up,
I'm going to just hold my coffee cup a little bit closer to myself
I'm
today.
just going to, yeah, it's not going to be the only thing being rationed, but let's be real. If you want me to be supportive of a war effort, I'm going to need to keep the coffee going. So if we have to do a round 2 of this at some point in the future, I hope we don't. Coffee needs to be exempted from that, At any rate, all jokes aside, so what we're going to do here, a little different structure. For people listening to the audio only, I'm going to be very verbal about everything that we're seeing. There's only a few pictures that are going to be put up on the screen, and we'll work to get on the website. I think some of the photos that are here, it's basically just some historical figures, public domain images of some government officials, things like that. So you're not really missing anything if you can't see the screen right now. But the title of the episode is Where Has the Coffee Gone? The Office of Price Administration, the OPA, and Rationing During World War II. So with that, I'm going to go into the first slide here. Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple details about the Office of Price Administration. We're going into the classroom at this point. The thing that created this as a government agency, a federal government agency, was in 1941. President Roosevelt gave an executive order, 8875, on August 28, 1941. Mind you, that's before Pearl Harbor, right? And the Office of Price Administration starts. It was originally under another agency called the Office for Emergency Management until January 30th, 1942. So just like 6 months or so, it's operating under this other thing. But I think it becomes clear that this is going to be such an extensive piece of work. It's going to be such a big agency that they're going to take it independent. So from 1942 on, it's independent. Then we get into the purpose behind what was the Office of Price Administration created for, the OPA. It was created to give oversight for price controls and rent. So at the beginning, it doesn't have to do with rations, and that's very important to acknowledge. They wanted to make sure that people were not being taken advantage of, that the hiked prices were going up during wartime. So supplies are limited. What would a retailer do, right? They're going to drive up the prices. So they're going to say, you can only go this high, and then rent the same thing, because we can already see it, right? Sweetie went to Kansas with Lou and Hutchinson, and there's all of these other families staying in these one rooms, and they're looking around for housing. So it's trying to help out at the beginning. But when the government steps in to help out, I mean, we're coming from the libertarian
perspective. When the government steps in to help.
Yeah, is it always going to go right? Now, I do believe
it's not. Isn't that amazing? It doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't. But I do believe that there were well-meaning individuals that were running this at some points. I think there were also some that were not. And we're going to get into sort of like the different characters that are here. But yeah, so that was the original function. So we think about this being like the biggest thing in World War II is rations. But when this was created, it was really about price controls and the rent. And then it gets abolished May 29th, 1947. So that's the time period that this is existing through 1946. So post-war, right? This continues from 41, pre-Pearl Harbor, all the way through World War II. And then it continues into 46, and then we get into 47, and the office is abolished. So however many documents the federal government had for price controls and rent, that's going to be the entire collection of the Office of Price Administration. So there's really a lot of documentation that comes around here just from the federal perspective, let alone the states and the counties. But that gives a little bit of background, really high-level overview of what they were supposed to be doing, especially at the outset. Okay. So let's talk about leadership in the Office of Price Administration. So when I'm talking about leadership, I'm talking about the people that are running the entire agency. And this presentation is going to delve into the backgrounds of 3 individuals that were they were the top guys for the Office of Price Administration. From 41 to 42, we get Leon Henderson, and we have information coming up on each of these guys. Then in 1943, we have Prentice Marsh Brown. And then the largest amount of time we have from 1943 to 1946 is Chester Bliss Bowles, which, Jamie, I just love that there's a guy named Chester who's running the show here for the vast majority of the time. And Bowles is a very, very interesting character. All right, so the first guy, and I love his picture here in the background.
Oh, goodness.
Leon Henderson. If ever we had the image of the stereotypical guy running a federal government agency in the 40s, it has to be this guy. Cigar in his mouth. This is the fat cat, kind of visual that we get of maybe if you're listening audio only, like the William Howard Taft kind of looking guy. So if you're trying to visualize who these guys look like, this is the first leader of the Office of Price Administration. So let's talk about Leon for a little bit. He was born in 1895, dies in 1986. So, he lives a while. He lives almost a 90-year life. He was born and raised in New Jersey. He attended Swarthmore College. Yeah, there. Jersey. Sorry, Jersey, not so sorry. I'm in Pennsylvania, so... Jersey. Yeah, born and raised in New Jersey, attended Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, so he comes over the river and goes to college over here. He's a professional pre-war career in the state government of Pennsylvania. Okay, so he joins the Pennsylvania government. He's the Deputy Undersecretary of State, and he teaches at Carnegie Mellon University, which is currently Carnegie Tech. So this guy's pretty well connected. He gets into politics pretty early on.
I was going to say, it looks like that once he got out of school, he went
Yeah.
right into government
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. He's succeeding his career once he got out of New Jersey. I think that's what we could say there.
He came to Pennsylvania and just like got incredibly
good. Yeah. He helped to create the Pennsylvania State Employees Retirement System in 1923. So that's what he's known for in Pennsylvania. And then he's working in the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, under Roosevelt in 1939. He's one of Roosevelt's economic advisors. And as a result of that, he becomes head of the OPA. So here you have a connected guy who's worked in state government. He's an economic advisor. He understands retirement and costs. So it's kind of a natural fit. You know, you get this idea of here's a guy that he understands price controls. He's already interested in the subject. So that's why Roosevelt said, this is the guy that should be running. Remember, at the beginning, price ceilings and rent control, right? Mm-hmm. So Leon goes in with that. He's unpopular, however, in this position. In 1942, we have a midterm election, and there are a lot of Democrats that get defeated, and he's credited with some of the failure of the Democratic election in 1942. Because of that, he gets replaced. They want to have a repeat of that in 44, because even if Roosevelt's popular, that doesn't mean that the down ticket candidates who are connected to him are not going to be affected by him being around. So Roosevelt says, it's been fun, but it's time to go, right? Like we can see this playing out. And so he finishes the rest of his career, his professional career, in private business. He doesn't return to government at this point, not in like the official capacity of he doesn't become a senator or house rep or something like that. Probably could have, but he was unpopular. And for the Democrats to come out and they find the scapegoat, and say, it's this guy. Okay, get out of government.
I was going to say, it's a little unusual to start your career like in government and then to move to business.
Yeah.
Typically you either start in business then move to government, or you start in government, you stay in government.
Right.
So for him to actually I don't want to say he messed this up, but he must have destroyed his reputation to a point where government work was really not an option for him, is what I'm looking at. This is not something that's typically done. So he was replaced in so he was replaced in 1942
after the election. 42. We head into 43 and they say, nope, we can't continue with Leon there. But it's interesting what you said. This is a very modern perspective, is once you're in politics, you tend to stay. We see a lot of people that have been in Washington, D.C. for a long time, until they're gone, right? But it's unusual for us. It's not as unusual for the founders, because think about a lot of the guys that they served their time and then they went and did their career. They had careers outside of it. A lot of guys, when they left state positions and things, they'd go and become railroad executives and things. We go back to the founders. You think about Jefferson. He leaves and he goes back to his farm because he's got a whole industry going on the farm. These guys had other jobs outside of politics. Today, we don't see that as much. They start otherwise and then they finish and they don't go further. So it's an interesting
think about this too. How many government agencies were there for them to go to? I mean, the government was not nearly as bloated. So the founders, they were able to go back to their business.
Yeah. Because who wouldn't? That's your business. That's your industry. That's what you're passing down to your children. Today, it's career politicians. So we've really changed up things here. All right. And then moving forward, let's go to who replaced him. Now, the guy that replaces him is only there for a year. He's there only in 1943. And we'll bring him up here. All right. So he gets replaced by Prentice Marsh Brown. And Prentice Marsh Brown.
Prentice is interesting, and it's an interesting name.
It is. Yeah. We don't see too many Prentices anymore. But yeah, Prentice Marsh Brown, 1889 to 1973. Here's another individual, lived for about, over 80 years. He's from Michigan. So he was born and raised in Ignace. Anybody in Michigan, please correct me. Attended the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and Albion College, and he becomes a lawyer. So this is a pretty traditional path for a politician. He begins as the attorney, and then he's part of the Democratic Party, right? Because this is Roosevelt's administration, so we should probably expect these are Democrats. Democratic Party elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. So he goes to Congress for Michigan's 11th district, and he's serving there from 33 to 36. And from that point on, he actually fills a gap and becomes a United States Senator from Michigan. So he switches in Congress from the House to the Senate. And from 36 to 43, he serves in the United States Senate. And he's on the Banking and Currency Committee. So I wonder where this is going to come into play. Here's another guy that understands money. You have the attorney that's working with commerce, banking, currency, right? We're talking about rations, rent, price controls. Makes sense. He replaces Leon in 1943, but he's only there for a year. Now, his post-war activity, he continues to practice law in Washington, D.C. He goes back to being an attorney and in Michigan, and was chairman of the Detroit Edison Company, presently known as the DTE Electric Company. And he's also known as the father of the Mackinac Bridge, chairman overseeing construction. So there's a really beautiful bridge out in Michigan. He's the guy that chaired the committee that got that built. So here's another guy that goes back to industry and achieves things outside of politics and goes back to his profession. But yeah, but he's out of there. He's only there in 43. He's at the Office of Price Administration.
So this guy, he gets in there for 1 year. I mean, he was a senator, which so he moved from the House to the Senate. That's interesting.
I think something happened with the Senate seat in Michigan. I believe. Let me check this. I believe that the senator that he replaced passed away. Yeah, for Congress. Yeah, James Couzens passes away in 1937. So, I'm sorry, there was a term ending in 1937. There was a vacancy because the senator had passed away. So he fills that vacancy in the Senate for Michigan, and he switches from one house of Congress, from one part of Congress to the other. So that's Prentice Marsh Brown. And then we get to the guy who's really going to be running the show till the end, under Roosevelt. His name is Chester. His name
is Chester, of course.
There we go. All right, we get to Chester Bliss Bowles. Now, he was born in 1901. He dies in 1986. Again, lives over 80 years. He was born in Springfield, Massachusetts, and he attended Yale University. He graduated with his Bachelor of Science in 1924. And his first job out of college is he goes and becomes a reporter at the Springfield Republican. And his dad was the editor.
Because he has a bachelor's in science. So he's going to be a journalist.
Yeah, he's going to go be a journalist. I mean, he's taking his opportunity. But yeah, I also find it interesting because Massachusetts is such a blue state that this is a Republican original background on Chester Bowles. And what does he do, as many children do, with regards to their parents' political ideology? He had a completely opposite ideology of his parents. So his parents were really big into the Republican Party in Massachusetts, and he follows the Democrats. So he doesn't stay at all. He actually goes to work at the United States consulate in Shanghai. So he travels abroad, which is really interesting. However, his father gets ill, and he returns to the United States. But his first thing, really, he's getting out of college. He had an in at the Republican. He gets his little job. And as soon as he can go, he's like, you know what? I don't want to be around all these Republicans because I'm a Democrat. So I'm going to go to Shanghai and work at the consulate there. But he gets the news that his father's ill and returns to Massachusetts. All right. So the next thing that Chester Bowles does is he founds an agency called Benton and Bowles. And it's an ad agency. So you think about like Mad Men in New York, right? The ad execs. He finds this in 1929, and they focus on radio advertising. We think about everybody listening to the radio, right? Sweetie's listening to the radio. They're listening to the ads. He winds up with this company creating the radio soap opera, right? So like they're at the right place at the right time with the right tech to see this is going to be really, really big. The brand doesn't exist anymore today, so I was looking into it, but it had merged in 1985, and it had basically existed in the background all the way to 2002. So these guys really did well. It wasn't known as Benton and Bowles after 85, but basically the structure, the company culture is still there at least until 2002. The Depression hits, because this is founded in 1929, right? That's the Depression time. So
that's like right when the Depression hit. Yeah, that's the beginning. Right?
But you think about entertainment during the Depression, radio. You can't really go out, can't afford to go out, you're going to listen to the radio. This still becomes a multi-million-dollar company during the Great Depression. So they're still doing well with the radio ads. And then he starts picking up contracts with major companies. Now look at the names of the major companies here, which is really important for what we're going to talk about. General Foods, Procter & Gamble, which is consumer goods, and Bristol-Myers, probably not as well known today, but that was in pharmaceuticals. Right? We think about rations coming up, and here's a guy that knows, like, You know all the guys that are running all these other companies that are in the same age range when World War II is going to come out. You've got the connections, on both sides of the aisle, because his parents are respected Republicans. He might be a Democrat, but you want to have those connections, and he has it in private industry. Now, he sells his shares and becomes a multimillionaire because they'd done so well at Benton and Bowles, and he quits private business at 40. Good job.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, but this man, like you
Yep.
said, his parents were Republican. He was a Democrat. He worked in Shanghai.
Yep.
He knows all of these, and he also went to Yale.
And he went to
So
Yale.
I'm sure that there was like a lot of connections that he made while he was there.
This is an interesting individual that, like,
he is.
and
it's very hard for me. And actually, like, he does remind me of the Good Doctor because his interests seem so varied and wide.
Like, why was he in Shanghai? What really drove him to go to Shanghai? Now, I do know that Chester wrote about a dozen books, and including his memoir, and I'm really tempted to start reading them, because here's a character that, unless you're really studying the OPA, or we'll get into it, the history of the state of Connecticut, and we'll find out why in a little bit here, he's just one of those characters of history that might be in, like, the margins or, like, a footnote. He's one of those. But, I mean, think about radio ads. Think about the Mad Men of the 50s, like how big advertising is going to become. A self-made guy, millionaire. It didn't say that his parents gave him the money, right? And that he just became rich. No, he was at the right place at the right time. He was smart. And you can just kind of tell already. Now, when you quit at age 40, you have some free time because you're not working anymore. And he'd already really appreciated Roosevelt and the New Deal. And he had also worked in the private sector with Eleanor Roosevelt, with the First Lady. So now he's got the connections with the president. He's got the connections with the companies, the connections with the president. And he seems to understand business really well because he's really rich. So that's going to be the guy, Roosevelt wants this guy to be around. All right. So in World War II, at first he opposes the U.S. going to war. And then he tries to join the Navy. So, woohoo, good job. But he's rejected for health reasons. He's not allowed to enlist. So he did try to sign up, but he's not allowed to serve. So because he's like, okay, well, I'm retired. I'm a multimillionaire. I mean, think about that too. Can we just talk about that for a moment? Here's a millionaire. He doesn't have to serve. He's made good. He can cruise for the rest of his life, especially a millionaire in that time frame. And he's still trying to sign up to serve. So, there's a sense of honor here. So in 1942, he joins the state of Connecticut because at this point, the OPA already exists, and he joins the Rationing Administrator. So rationing is starting to happen at this point. He becomes the Director of Price Administration for Connecticut, and then the General Manager for Connecticut. So now you got Roosevelt. He's already worked in the private sector when he had his business with the First Lady, and they're like, you know what? Leon didn't work out. Prentice here, I don't think he's really working out, but we got this guy. It's really good with business, with good connections. And he's not going to be trying to probably scrape off the top of things, right? Because he's already a millionaire. We should probably call this guy. So he becomes, in 1943, he replaces Prentice. He becomes the administrator of the Office of Price Administration as appointed by Roosevelt. So Roosevelt says, you're the guy. You're in charge now. Let's make it work. And he is also a member of the War Production Board and the Petroleum Board. So again, we think about gas rations and things like this. This guy knows exactly what's going on. He's going to be the guy that runs it until it's over. He's not replaced. You don't replace this guy, right? He does seem like he knows what's up. All right. So immediate post-war, here's everything he does after the war. In 1946, when the OPA is over, he becomes the director of the Office of Economic Stabilization, right? So it's kind of a related office under Truman. Then he tries to run for governor of Connecticut, because why not? He doesn't succeed this time. So because he doesn't succeed, he becomes the American delegate to the first conference of the United Nations Economic, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, which is current day UNESCO. So he's the first conference, he's the American delegate. Makes sense. He ran the OPA. And then in 47 to 48, he becomes the special assistant to the UN Secretary General. 47 to 48, so he's really busy in this post-war time period. He becomes special assistant to the UN Secretary General. And then in 48, he runs again for governor of Connecticut. Notice the 2-year term there. He runs again, and he wins. And he becomes the governor of the state of Connecticut. So there's a lot of information about him, I believe, in the state archives for Connecticut. And it's something where if I travel up there, I'm going to have to go find some information about Chester Bowles here.
About Chester, yes.
Yeah. But very busy. He's not leaving political life. He's still retired. He can basically do whatever he wants at this point. But
at this point, he has the knowledge and the financial ability. Like he's, he doesn't have to worry about money. I think it's very interesting because he ran the rationing board. Like he ran this. I would not want him to be my governor either.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's not a good
yeah.
I can't imagine that he had much popularity or much support.
In 46.
I'm sure that there was people who weren't as affected by rations that were supportive of the rations.
Let's just say that in 46, when he lost, maybe he should have thought harder about rationing the coffee. It may have stayed with them for the immediate future. Actions have consequences, Chester.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But then they forgot about it. 2 years later, he becomes the governor of Connecticut.
He did win. Okay. And he moves on with that, and he becomes the governor. And then his career actually continues from here. Remember, he's born in 1901. So he's not like in his 70s or 80s when we're getting into the 50s. From 49 to 51, he serves as the 78th governor of Connecticut. And then from 51 to 53, remember how he went to Shanghai right after he was working? Now he becomes the third ever U.S. ambassador to India. So he goes abroad, and he makes all these connections with apparently the person who was in charge of India at the time was very hard to get along with, and he did get along with Chester here. And I do kind of envision that Chester Bowles is like Chester Demery, and I kind of have that visualization in my mind of a similar mindset. Remember Chester Demery, the good doctor, he's Democrat as well. These guys would have had some interesting conversations. He could have sent him a questionnaire.
He would have been like, come to my farm. We shall putter.
We shall putter about.
They will putter. They will just putter so much, just like only a Chester can do.
Only a Chester can do. Yeah. If ever I see anybody named Chester, I'm just going to have this whole idea about who the character is. But yeah, he becomes our third ambassador to India for the United States. 59 to 61, he's still serving. He gets reelected. He goes to Congress and becomes Connecticut's 2nd district in the U.S. House of Representatives. And then in 61, JFK is now the president. He's like, hey, this guy's pretty interesting. I've heard about Chester Bowles. So he brings him in as the United States Undersecretary of State for his opening administration. However, Chester actually is going to oppose the Bay of Pigs invasion. And for this, the JFK administration is going to say, we don't really want this guy around. But think what it took as a Democrat to stand up to JFK, how popular he was, and say, I don't want to do Bay of Pigs.
He's a Chester, so he's made of strong stuff.
He is, yeah. But he says, you know what, it's okay. In 63, for the next 6 years, he's like, I'm going to go back to India then. And he goes back to India, and he becomes the 8th ambassador to India. So there have been these other ambassadors in the last 10 years from when he was the 3rd. There have been, 5 other guys? The 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th? So 4 other guys between 53, and he says, it's okay, guys, I'm not busy right now. I'll go back to India. I get along with these guys.
Yeah.
And so some of his books have to do with his work in India. So if anybody's interested in the United States and India relations, this is the guy you want to read his stuff, because here's a guy that had a lot of influence, because for 9 years in this mid-century, he's the ambassador and he's getting along with them. And then his phrase that he used was, he had a feeling for the people's side, which I actually really like. This guy seems like a very genuine, liberal-minded of the 1950s Democrat, of the Harry Truman sort of type of Democrat. Again, all of it is completely opposite from how he was raised, right? Because his parents were Massachusetts Republicans. And pretty important, it would seem, being newspaper editors, Massachusetts Republicans. But this is quite a service. And as a result, in his retirement, as I would have to believe, he writes a whole bunch of books. And his books are still available. You can find them. And, he retired when he was 40. So what do you do when you leave public service? Well, you're going to write your memoirs. You're going to write your books about what's going on. He's going to go out and give speeches. He's the former governor and things like that. But a really fascinating individual that outside of the context of the OPA, or if you're in Connecticut, the history of the state government of Connecticut, he can kind of fade into the background a little bit. We might miss him. But I think he really, he's like, as you said, he has really, some strength to oppose JFK in the 60s. And remember, he originally opposed going into World War II, and he tried to sign up. I think he understands the cost of what this was going to be. And it was very human. And he says it, a feeling for the people's side. So very interesting leader. And yet he's going to lead this whole Office of Price Administration. If you're going to have a government agency that's going to have a leader that we may or may not agree with today, at least I do feel that the OPA was being run by someone with a lot of principle and character from 43 to 46 for the vast majority of its time. At least we can say the executive at the top seems to be, from just this sort of light review of his history, a good person. And when we hope for that, was it David McCullough mentions with the John Adams inscription in the White House, honest and wise, right? Let none that serve, and that was in the case of the presidency, let none that serve, that make sure that they're all, that they hold in the highest principle, honest and wise. And while he wasn't the president, he was still a state executive. And I get the sense that he's of the same mindset. And of course, he's coming from Massachusetts. So let's give him the Adams reference. John Adams was from Massachusetts, right? So honest and wise. As much as we might not agree with his policy or his politics on rations and things like that, especially today, he genuinely cared. And that's the sense we get. Can't speak so much for Leon or Prentice. They weren't there long enough, but this is a very interesting public career. And then he retires and he does the lecture circuit, it would seem, from this point on. So, interesting guy. Now, let's talk a little bit about regulation versus deregulation. Well, we're libertarians, so we know where we are on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But effort to control inflation during wartime, that's going to be really important to the OPI. Modes of transportation could be used to carry supplies of military importance to the front. So the effort here was basically, they don't want all the transportation modes to be caught up with consumer goods because they've got to get a lot to the front and those important transports. Imagine if you have goods coming from overseas for the domestic market. People would like to buy XYZ, but we need that ship to carry goods to the front. So we're going to ration things so there's less coming over in the ships so we can repurpose the ships to get things to the men at the front. That's the idea. Then we have
let's also remember that a lot of the ships that were traveling carrying supplies were shot down.
Right.
And
they're sinking.
We're sinking. We're sinking. So they had a problem even getting supplies at all.
Yeah.
So of course they have to like tighten up.
Yeah, they got to look to all of that. And this guy, right, he wanted to join the Navy. So, he has an interest in that. He's growing up in Massachusetts. There's a huge naval influence up in New England. But yeah, so he's definitely aware of that. And we had that, we were talking in a previous episode about just how many ships had sunk. And it's just unfathomable. I didn't intend to make a pun there with the word fathom with regards to ships sinking. But unfathomable that so many in our mindset today did actually sink. Because a lot of times we hear about the ships going down and the men being aboard. The transport carriers, few people aboard, lots of supplies just gone. Then we have the issue of state supervision of private industries with a focus on women. This is where I think we know these people. If you imagine that there's that person in your life, right? The person that's like the really busybody, like nosy person that wants to be in everybody's business, right? And they can mobilize that energy to watch what everybody's buying at the store as a job. Like, can you just imagine that character? I mean, we've seen this character in movies, right? Like it's like the person who's in charge of like the school parents association, and they have the bake sale and they have the list that everybody like bring their brownies and they didn't do their job over here. That person, they're gonna find a way to mobilize these individuals and say, we know what they're best suited for. We need to make sure everybody's doing their job at the local level. It's like the women as spies idea. We're all going to get this done. It's for the cause. Amazing ability.
So they created this sense of moral superiority because if you were not rationing, if you were not sacrificing, then these women would find you out.
They reveled in it. They looked for women that were good at this, and that was their personality to do this. And there's a drive to recruit the women to do this. So that could be a whole dissertation by itself. Find all of, like, the power women in the local communities that were doing this and all the personalities there. I bet it's in letters. I bet there's letters in people's attics being like, I can't seem to get anything extra. They're not letting me get away with it. And then we were so, like, it's a very interesting thing there. And then the concern comes up with regulation. Post-war environment, regulations hindering new business. Regulations seem to stifle economic growth. At a certain point, when we're leaving the war environment, how long is this going to keep on going? It ends in 47. It's not over in 46. Truman's actually going to try to extend it. It's going to fail. And everyone's going to be like, I think we're done.
And so that this was a popular decision. It like this was something like they're like the war's over, so
Yeah.
it didn't garner any more support.
Yeah. In our podcast, we're going to get into subjects of the post-war housing situation. As all the men come home, lots of them have gotten married, starting families, and there's going to be a supply issue with housing immediately after the war. You can see where the OPA would be very valuable here to control prices and things with the housing situation. But there's a certain point where the American economy is going to say, okay, like, the war's over, and we're going to proceed with the capitalist environment here. So that was pretty much all the slides I put together, just to kind of do some high-level basics of what's going on. And then what we have, and this is wonderful, is we have some of the documents, and we'll start with documents from the retailers. Now, again, there's millions of documents, so I've curated these, looked around for some things that are interesting. All right. This is a document I was really happy to get. I just wanted to get his signature. It's like one of those history things coming from when he was serving, because there's a lot of signatures of him signing stuff as governor of Connecticut. But this is specifically when he's signing a document as the head of the Office of Price Administration. And it is a very, I would say, almost vanilla, mundane statement. He says, we are, I believe, at a crossroads of history. We don't have a date on this, but we know it's between 43 and 46. For generations to come, the world's millions of human beings will look back with respect or with sorrow at what we accomplished or failed to accomplish in this most critical period. So he's trying to express how important the job is that they're doing. I think he's genuine, but it's a really kind of mundane statement. But it's neat to see this is an authentic document. There's Chester's signature running it as the administrator. And then we see at the bottom here, we actually see this little stamp for victory. For victory by United States war bonds and stamps, right? So they're probably stamping all their paperwork with that. All right, and that's the first document. Let's start with Chester, and then let's get into some of these instructions. Now, these are documents that I found online and purchased, so I have the originals, that are from retailers in Iowa. So we actually have Iowa retailer documents here. And there's more of this kind of stuff online for people that are looking into it. But this is the retailer's bulletin from January of 1943. And imagine if you're a retailer and you're running things, you're constantly getting like that new bulletin. Okay, what are the rules we got to follow today? OPA has been in existence now for a bit. This is 43. So in 1943, every civilian here at home will have to get along on less so that our armed forces will have everything they need over there. And they're quoting over there because of the old song. Everybody knows the old song, over there, the Yanks are coming. Okay, go look it up. It's from World War I. It's a really important song called Over There. So we must feed American soldiers, sailors, and Marines who are now carrying our fight to the enemy on the battlefields all over the world. Shortages in some essential foods are here already to make certain that every American has an opportunity to get a fair share, and no more your government will order rationing wherever necessary.
So the government, like here, it's they're taking it upon themselves to tell you what you need. Yes. And I understand, and like, of course, this was supported at that time because the Americans, they were very patriotic. They loved their country. They loved their soldiers. Many, and especially in Iowa, we know that many Iowans went over. Many Iowans were involved in the wars. You know, had a proud heritage of being involved in wars. But it just like in this day and age, this would never fly. Never. It wouldn't
fly today. No, I don't see people doing this today. And then we have to mind it. This is the retailer's bulletin. So they have certain responsibilities they need to follow here. So when they're saying, what should you know? This isn't going to the consumer. Retailers don't want to get fined, right, for not following the rules.
So the government basically kind of employed retailers to
They had to follow it.
to follow the orders, like to carry out this program, the
Carried out.
retailers.
Right.
Yeah.
Retailers have to do it, yeah. So he says your customers will receive the new We're Ration book too. And I have some of these ration books so people can see what they look like. Your customers will have to use the new one to buy certain foods that will be rationed under the new system of point rationing. So this is where we get rationing coming through. Now, if we see the subtitle at the top, we can see that this is an OPA document that's issued by the Food Rationing Division. So you've got that bureaucracy, right, building up. We have the Food Rationing Division going on here. What is point rationing? Point rationing is a system for rationing all items in a group of closely related foods. So now we got rations for different types of foods. Imagine how complicated this was getting, which are bought in place of one another when some are scarce. So the same ration stamps can be used. So they give an example. In the rationing of processed foods, the ration group will include canned, bottled, and frozen fruits and vegetables, fruit and vegetable juices, dried fruits, and all canned and bottled soups. Many of these processed foods are similar and can be substituted for one another in the daily diet. When these processed foods are rationed, they will all be rationed together. So they're saying there's really no exception here. If there's somebody saying, well, that's not rationed over there because they're using it as a substitute, they're like, but wait a minute, it's part of this category. So we're rationing the category of like canned vegetables. This has to do with vegetables and fruits. So they're giving that example. And then they justify the need for the ration system itself here. This is why I find these documents so fascinating, because it's showing the logistics, and the retailer has to keep in mind they don't want to get fined, right? So they're going to do this. And they're like, then go into a whole example about apricots. Now I'll put these documents online so people can read through this and kind of get a sense for what the retailers were going through. Imagine if you're like, I just want to bake a cake, I'm going to use a substitute over here. They know. How many women were reporting back, hey, you know what we could do? Like, these are all in the same these are all in the same zone. They know. They're the people going to the store. So they know exactly what's going on. They're reporting back. Think of the network. I think of all these networks of like the gossiping women saying, oh, you know what, this should be the next update to the division, and I'll get some points, and I'll get like that lead title over here at the War Rations Board. Amazing. But yeah, it goes into a whole story about apricots. Using peach ration stamps. There were peach ration stamps. Sorry, Georgia. I guess the state of Georgia was probably people going out to the orchards being like, nah, not doing it. Yeah, so they say at the end of the whole thing, their whole example they go into on their justification of the system, the entire line of canned fruits and vegetables will be rationed in a group with the same ration stamps. This will allow each customer to buy his fair share of the total supply of all canned fruits and vegetables, and allow him to buy the one he prefers. So they spin it in such a way that like, oh, everyone's going to get along. But
they spin it in such a way that they're being generous.
Yeah, so they're being generous with it there.
They're being generous. They're allowing you to like buy the ones you prefer. You can't buy so many, but if you and also there was a lovely little line in there that said, "This point rationing will make your job easier." It definitely there's a feeling of manipulation there.
Oh yeah,
where it's they give this as not only is it good, but it's also easy and better for you. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. Now we're coming from that modern perspective. For you. It's hard for us to place ourselves back in that time, and like again, that's why I wanted to lead with Chester. You really have a genuine guy, I think, leading the whole thing and leading the charge for what he needs to do. But we could just see like, when you start to see the logistics of that, it's like, oh my goodness. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, this is like dissertation level history majors listening to this. There's a lot of stuff out there that's really, the implications of it are really fascinating and what it's going to do with people. No, like, yeah, 46 governors races. Sorry, no. Like, this is the inside of that, same brochure that came through, how to make your sales, and here's how the point values are going to be set. Okay, so now you got to do some math. So on top of it, just have even the big calculators we had, no internet. You can't just like type in an algorithm and it'll spit it out for you. Remember, we're still in telegraph mode over here, so this is going to take a while. These are merely examples and not actual point values. So canned corn in 8-ounce can might be a point, or 20 ounces 3, and then spinach is 3. It's different based. So now they got to figure it out. This is why I'm going to put these documents online, because they're government issued documents from the 40s. They're public, but yeah, corn is one value, peas is a different, spinach is a different. So people can look at these tables and kind of get an idea of that. So, and it says, you got to display the point values, of course, so people know,
Mm-hmm.
what they have to have. And the stamps, the ration books say, like, here's a point, things like that under the point system. And remind you, it's not to pay for it. It's just to say you're allowed to buy it. So you have so many points and you're allowed to buy with a price ceiling controlled item, that item. So if a customer, they give an example here, wants to buy the 8-ounce size of canned peas, which has a point value of 2, he has to give you 2 points worth of blue stamps. Now we have different color stamps as well. So
Oh, goodness, of course.
stamps or 2 1-point stamps. We haven't even gotten to the coffee yet, but and we really delve into like each of these documents, but you start to get a sense of just the level of control and the meticulous nature. Like if you're a retailer at this time, to make sure your books are accurate for whatever inevitable audit the government's going to have on this, it's going to be a lot of anxiety on these retailers.
And I love at the bottom of that too, it said, all of the point values are just simply examples. Don't take this to heart.
Right.
So not only did the shopkeepers have to, budget, order food, take care of their store, do whatever taxes need to be done. Now they also have to make sure that they're getting the correct amount of stamps. Yep. They're getting the correct color of stamps, and that and they're not allowing anybody to buy anything that they don't have a stamp for.
Right. Yeah. And so naturally in the same bulletin, here's the stamps. So they give us an example of what the stamps look like. Now, because you're going to have that woman from the rationing board coming around and making sure that the books look right. So, but here's the stamps. You can see like the values. Letter indicates when it may be used. So you can't use them early. There's timing. That's why there's different ration books. And then the value of the stamp. No sales without stamps. You will not be allowed to sell rationed items to any person without receiving points in exchange. What to do with stamps, why point values will be changed. Any scarcities discussed in the example should not be considered real. So they're just giving these examples. But that's why I love these retailer documents, because instead of just showing the ration book and being like, well, this was the system, there are points, we see so much being put on the retailers here. Think what this is doing to the economy. Some people are going to say, I'm not going to go into grocery right now. It's too much.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is it adds an extra layer of bureaucracy. And also, I'd like to point out, we haven't seen what the consequences are of not following that system.
Right.
What happened to you if you might have lost your business. You were no longer allowed to sell things. Maybe
you were constantly violating it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Anybody that wants to go for rationing and point systems right now, well, I guess you have all the structure intact of how to do it. But
well, it only lasted for a few years. It was an interesting experiment.
It was, yeah.
And then it work? I don't know. What do you consider it to be successful?
We won the war.
There you go.
If the measurable objective of all these agencies was victory in the war, then we achieved the objective. If it ensured more supplies and goods got to the front and everybody was subscribing to this, then we won. It was a unique time, right? We do have to bear that in mind. And people are there are going to be genuinely people who are like, I'm going to do my part to help, right? They want to have that feeling like they've done their part, even if they can't be at the front. Chester Bowles couldn't serve in the Navy. So in his mind, he's doing this in lieu of being able to serve in the Navy for the cause, right? And that's pretty clear based on his following service record that he has. He didn't have to do it. He could have sat back and instead he's running the system. Could you imagine volunteering? Because I'm sure he had some sort of salary or something like that. He didn't need the money, clearly. He's basically saying, I'm going to spend the war years dealing with these logistics at the federal level. That doesn't sound like a piece of cake there. Now, on the back of the page here, it says canned and bottled fruits and fruit juices will be rationed, and you can start seeing the types. Now, with regards to the types, I do have the list of some of the costs so we can see things that were being rationed here and what they were dealing with. And I tried to there's so many different documents, but I wanted to kind of get a sampling so we could get literally a taste, no pun intended there, either a taste of...
You're just throwing those puns out. It's like your second
one. They're just coming today. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But here's an old document. This is one of the documents from Iowa. And look how intense this is if you're the grocery. There are 6 categories just of peaches. This document goes for 3 pages. and it has a grade and the size, and here's the maximum price you're allowed to charge. So I'll put all these documents up so people can see what was being rationed, but also what the costs were. So you can see cost of living, use the inflation calculators online. You can figure out, what was the max price that people could charge back then. I mean, pork and beans, there's 6 of those. All the different styles of corn, canned tomato juice, and the brands. This is the other fascinating thing. If you're wondering which brands were around during World War II, here you go. Because when you look at the brand, you can see there for the tomato juice, there's Campbell's. And some of these brands might not exist anymore. So there's a curiosity here. I know everyone's probably interested
I'm
in
looking. I'm like, there's Libby's.
There's
I
Libby's
see
still
Libby's,
around.
but I don't see, like, there's Opal and Cool Spring and Monarch seems to come up here a couple times, but I've not heard of those.
They could have merged into other companies. Heinz, we see at the bottom for baby food. Gerber's, we see at the bottom. Right? We can see all these consumer goods coming in. And also remember, I said at the beginning with Chester, who did he make connections with as a radio ad exec? Procter & Gamble, General Mills. He knows probably everybody. How many ads do you think he did for all the companies listed here in the 20s and 30s? He knows all these guys. So they're working it out behind the scenes. There's so much that we can see here, and there's so much we can imply just based on his connections. But we have 3 pages of that. I'll get those online so everybody can look at the 3. And then I actually love what's on the back of that particular set. It just makes me feel bad, and I'll show it on the screen. Yeah, and we don't know what these are for, but we know what's going on, and you'll know in a moment what I'm talking about. Right. This is the poor shop owner's writing in the back, trying to figure out the math of whatever he's about to order. Right. This is the inventory list. It just makes me like, I'm tired for you, historically tired for you. And I love when I see stuff like this. You can see it's on the back from the transparency of the paper there of the list of prices there. But I love little things like that. That's like, so he's trying to work it out. This particular Iowa retailer.
I feel so bad for them.
Right. He's going through it. Now, that is like the rules, and we get an idea for the types of things that are being rationed. That's going to continue through meats and everything else on the list. On the cereal list, for example, we get things like Kellogg's, right? Wheaties, Cheerios. You can also see all like the types. They've got all of it listed out here. Hershey's chocolate, not okay, obviously. We're from Pennsylvania, not okay. And so I'll post those and people can have fun perusing those documents. Then we start to head, and I've got these in the order that they were released here. And there's more than these, but it's a good little idea of how this works. This was a letter that was in March of 43, specifically on coffee. Not okay. Many retailers doing business on a relatively small scale find that their allowable inventories of coffee are too small to enable them to maintain adequate stocks for the consumers here. To care for such cases, it has been decided to grant certain petitions made by retailers for increases over and above their allowable inventories. Petitions may be made to an OPA form number R-315 to the board with which the retailer is registered. The local boards, remember who's running those, the local boards are hereby directed to act on petitions as set forth below. And here's all the rules so you can make a petition to get more. Logistics.
So you got to go fill a petition out.
Yeah, and you better be in good graces with the board in your area. I mean, because if you're one that's potentially being fined or whatever the consequences are, you think they're going to grant your petition? They're not going to grant your petition. So you got to be. And then there's that woman that's running the board over there, even if maybe she does or doesn't have the title. She's running the board over there locally. She's coming around. You did not bring the cookies to the bake sale, like in the example today, like that very meticulous person. We all have met these people in life. They're running the show, and they're intentionally running the show. The ability of the government to know, like, we can put these guys to work in the right place. So this document is an example of like how you get a little extra beyond what you need and what you have to follow. And then it goes on for a while. A retailer.
Oh, but hold on, at the bottom it does say if the board approves the petition.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and venture a little theory here that if these boards were difficult to work with and made up of people who were like maybe making some enemies.
Yeah.
I can see how like that they're like, oh, you want to keep going? Well, guess what? We don't want this anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, this was something where you could really see the true character of some of the women on these boards.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And not to like limit it exclusively to the women, but it just seems to be, I'm going to kind of stereotype that at the time.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
Yeah,
sure there was some
for
men,
sure.
but a lot of the men
Doing this.
were overseas, and a lot of
Right,
the men were,
right. Yeah, they're
somewhere else.
serving. There's a lot in the
Mhm.
service. This is how the women are like, I'm doing my job to serve the country with this.
So this is a lot of really awesome stuff for what the retailers have to
What they
do.
had to go through. And we have a few more of these, and then we'll show some of the consumer, because the consumer is basically having to juggle all these ration books. That's what they're going to have to do. But I also note here at the bottom, as you mentioned with the board action, the local board, the certificate number on the retailer's OPA form R1202 or OPA form R1203. Like today, we go looking up these forms, and there's already too many forms, and we can access them easily on the internet. They're going to go through their file cabinet. Oh, this is form 1203. Oh, what if it's in the wrong form? Well, maybe that's not going to go through right then. The meticulous nature of this. I mean, they're already on form 1203, so that means there were 1202 that came before 1200.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Like, it's all the things that we're not seeing. They're like, oh, this is not good. This is not
I'm
good.
exhausted just looking at it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And then we get into this document. This gives us a little more as we move forward in time. I mean, these are very fascinating documents. The storyline that we can see. Here's from May of 1944. This is from the Liberty Building in Des Moines. It was a memo to the War Price and Rationing Boards, to the chairman. So we get to see some of the titles here of the price panel. The chairman of the price panel, the chief clerk, the price clerk, because you need your clerk, your secretary for the price board, from the acting district director and the district price executive. Can you imagine all these titles going on across the board? The subject of this memo, new poultry prices. We have to talk about the cost of the chicken. So here's the memo about the cost of the chickens. Please refer to DPO 54, probably a price document, right? Effective November 19th, 1943. So make sure you don't lose any of the documents you have as a retailer, because you might have to refer back to what's going on. Here's their names. And what I love about this is it gives the math equation. If we look in the middle of the document here, it says sales by producers to processing plants and produce stations. The price is set forth under 3 groups, namely Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3 counties. So now you're in a specific group of counties. Certain things can charge certain way. It's a simple matter for you to determine the county in which you fall and find the price for the poultry items in the style in which it is being sold. So now you have to remember what group you're in. Your counties are in a specific group, okay? And that's how you're gonna figure out how much to charge for things. Effective May 1st, the following addition may be made to 2 and 3 above, which 2 and 3 above are the sales by the producers. 20.022 cents. Can we just round up to the 100, please? My goodness. Per pound. This isn't gas. Like at the gas tank, that's the only time we see like the liter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, come on, guys. For the heading 1, sales by producers or processing plants to consumers, you must take the price listed under 2 as corrected and multiply times 1.20. Can we just multiply by a whole number? Seriously.
No,
you may break the final calculation to the nearest full cent. Well, thank you, to the nearest full cent. That would be lovely.
Oh, they're like, there you go. You're welcome.
For example,
we made it easy for you.
Let's give you some examples just in case. Now, mind you, I think people were better at math those days to work through this, by hand. They give the example. Number 1, a poultryman. So for anybody following along, if you want to give your kids like a math problem to do at home, here you go. 1, a poultryman wants to know what he can charge for New York dressed fryers, that's the chicken, sold to a consumer in Benton County. The computation would then be 0.385 times 1.20 equals 0.462. And hence the price would now be 46 cents per pound, which he could charge on this type of sale. However, a producer in Carroll County wants to know what he can receive for the sale, which weighed under 4.5 pounds drawn. The price would be this other equation. For the month of June, 0.1 cents per pound is to be added to the base price, just in case you forgot. There's like an extra charge to add in here. Make sure you don't forget the extra charge, to here again, the price under the
I'd be like, I'm gonna join the army.
You know what?
I'm not doing this anymore. Like,
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think people
I
are
feel like
willing to
in one
post
of our
them.
letters, like Sweetie was talking about one of her friends was dating a grocery guy.
Yeah, she was so excited because she was gonna go and marry the grocery guy. So yeah, there's
The
gonna be
guy that had
some.
the grocery store. I wonder what he I wonder what his thoughts were on this.
I'm gonna put. I'll make sure I get the link to it when I put it up. These videos on the website. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it in the glossary for Office of Price Administration, and there will be a whole page where you can just click the PDFs and read to your heart's content. The history here, and then we get this one. I like this bulletin because it has some fun artwork. See the little produce that's dancing at the bottom. It's like, let's all go to the movies, right? With like the soda and the popcorn guy in the old movie. That's what it looks like for the people listening to the audio only at the moment. It's like these like little dancing cartoons. I do like the style of the 40s, what they did with the artwork.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It is. It is.
Yeah, it's very distinct to the time. But if we get into this is the August 1944 OPA food guide for retailers. Fresh fruit and vegetable markups, new percentage, and cents per pound markups over net cost must now be used to find ceiling prices for the fresh fruits and vegetables following. So they've got to really be on top of all these bulletins. They cannot miss one. So the store groups: cucumbers, hothouse, peppers, sweet. So there's your peppers, actually. We're talking about peppers. But 1 and 2, we've got the stamps and like what the selling units are. They have a little note here about work gloves. Beginning September 15th, 1944, all staple work gloves that you sell or display must be marked. So we have to remember this is not just about food. This is about consumer goods overall. I just happen to have the food things because I think it's the most relatable thing for most people. But there's documents about this for every aspect of what people could be purchasing.
Yeah, like because everything was rationed. Shoes, right? Gas.
That's right. Yeah, shoes. Yeah, Chester was talking about
I don't know,
the
like
shoes.
if they had clothing, but I'm sure, like hosiery.
Oh yeah,
like
I'm
that.
sure all of it. Yeah, at least the raw materials, no doubt. Yeah. And then this one actually continues. We get some more of this fun artwork that exists. Unbranded soaps and cleansers, and here we start to see some other information. Ration checks for points that retailers or wholesalers surrender to OPA need no longer be certified by banks. So there's a whole banking logistics system that's going on behind the scenes here that we could probably spend a long time just delving into however that worked. Transfers, registration, ration currency.
Oh
If you're
gosh.
dealing with
So
issues, look at this sad stamp up here that's
oh,
wearing
he's very sad.
maybe
So
that should be
this
the
is
logo.
interesting.
I'll put that up there. that
It says
Vantage stamp.
a torn or mutilated certificate is good only if more than one half of it remains.
Yes.
So if you tore your stamp and you had like a little bit more, they could still take it.
Maybe I'll use that as like the head of the page. I really like the sad bandaged ration stamp character that we have here. He's very sad. That'd be fun. And then we've got our Pledge of Allegiance to the OPA coming up on the next screen here, which is fantastic. It's so unending. It's great. Mind you, there's millions of these documents. Like the delight of some of this, at a certain point you start going, okay, here's the Pledge of Allegiance kind of photo. My pledge to you, literally, they say, I charge no more than top legal prices. I sell no ration goods without collecting stamps. So we get that going on there. Point record. So mind you, this is 44. They're just reinforcing everything. They're putting out these bulletins. And then we start to head into what I believe is probably the bulletin of all bulletins. This is, we started with where has the coffee gone? I think we all know where it went at this point. But how is coffee rationing? I'm going to drink my coffee as I say this. How is coffee rationing going to happen? Well, I found online, this is a poster, mind you. This document opens up. There's very few of these, I think, that survive. And I'll say why in a moment. It opens up into a full poster with photos of how the process works at the store. So we'll show that at the end. But on one side, it's like a bulletin, and then you're supposed to open it up and you're supposed to hang this in the store. So I think a ton of them didn't survive because if they were hanging up, they'd pull them down. They have tape in the corner and they get thrown away. I doubt many of these survive. It's one of my favorite documents I've found as a result of doing this podcast that I love having the collection. It's the coffee bulletin. Coffee rationing begins November 29th, a day of infamy. Here we get the date. They're letting them know. And this is coming from 1942. So it's going to be rationed as of November 29th, 1942. I'm going to put that on my calendar and just drink so much coffee on November 29th every year.
I'm going to buy so much like expensive stuff and like
principle.
coffee. And, like, yeah. It's like, we're going to toast it every day or every time.
Yep.
Every time.
Let's look at the rules here. Here comes the coffee rationing rules. Sales halt. So first of all, you don't get to buy any while the store is restocked. Let's look at the calendar here, shall we? What happens in the third week of November every year? Since Lincoln made it a holiday. So let's see. Thanksgiving 1942. What day was that? November 26th. How dare you? How dare you stop selling coffee for Thanksgiving? Are you kidding me right now? You stopped selling coffee during Thanksgiving just to get ready to not be able to sell more coffee?
It's truly it
this
hurts
is why
my
we're
heart.
Libertarians.
Yes, this hurts me. Like I feel pain.
The wound. I feel
this happened a long time ago. It did not last very long, but goodness, I can't even imagine. There's this is November, so they were in the war. Obviously,
in the war. 42.
They're in the war. People are have been having to deal with the war.
Yep.
Then they're like, now we need you to go into the holiday season with no coffee.
The first Thanksgiving when America was in the war. Remember December 7th, 1941. And what's the thing the government's going to do for the very first Thanksgiving during World War II? We're going to take your coffee away. This is why, the 9 most dangerous words are, we're from the government and we're here to help. That's why the libertarians understand this. Look at what they did.
Mm-hmm.
For Thanksgiving.
Never again.
You're welcome, America. There you go. That's the government, So I love this poster so much because it goes for 4 pages about how coffee's going to work. They have to detail out everything because you know what's going to happen. Like today, when you try to take people's coffee away from them, not going to work. Not going to work back then. And they're going to find every exception. War offices, the ration boards are going to go make sure nobody bought any coffee during Thanksgiving.
I'm reading this. Please, listener, get online and read these. But it says here, what is coffee? Like they have to tell us what coffee is. It's set. Coffee rationing applies to any coffee, packaged or unpackaged, bean or ground, whether or not decaffeinated, and to any mixture of coffee and chicory, cereal, chickpea, or any other substance.
I have questions here. Yeah.
That's a good... Chicory is actually a very good substitute for coffee. If you find it, you dig up the roots and you can make like a coffee with it.
Yep.
So they were like, no, you're not going to sneak anything past us.
Nice try. Yeah. Chicory actually, in the Civil War, because the Confederacy really was running out of coffee for the armies, they wind up, chicory becomes the dominant coffee substitute for the Southern armies. So that's been around.
Have you ever had any?
I don't think I've had chicory. It's coming back into popularity. People are doing a lot with chicory nowadays. But chickpea, what are they doing with chickpeas?
Yeah, I don't know. I knew I don't know where chickpeas came
Someone
come
investigate.
into this.
Now, they do indicate what's not rationed. Coffee concentrates, soluble coffee, liquid coffee extracts, and any similar products made in whole or in part from coffee. Coffee substitutes when not mixed with coffee. Sale of green coffee to consumers is prohibited. This has been a thing. I think there was like a recent push from one of the retailers that's like, oh, we're doing green coffee now. The green coffee beans came back into a style a number of years ago. And I think all the advertising was acting like this had never been a thing before. Clearly was, because they're calling it out here. But also, if you're the one not being rationed, especially the concentrates, I wonder how the stock prices are doing for the companies doing coffee concentrates and things like that. Like,
so this would be like a taster's choice or something.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting there. Now, decaffeinated. Sorry for anybody drinking coffee. I don't believe in decaf coffee. That's not a thing. I don't believe in decaf coffee. There's a very clear reason for this. Look at the person who patented the decaf process. look this up on your own time, and then you cannot unsee what is here, and then stop drinking decaf. Okay, it's philosophically abhorrent in my mind to drink decaf. Go drink green tea if you don't want caffeine. I don't have time for this. So, but they're classifying, but I'm going to be opinionated about that.
Yeah, that's okay. You die on that hill, Allison. I'm all for it. Yep. And I'm actually curious, and I really don't want to get into it any further because I would really love those people to go and see it for themselves, please.
Yeah. So we can save it. There's some other inner pages here. I'm going to go to the back page of this document, though, so that we can see. There's one of the page, actually, maybe it's the third page. There's a page here that lists sort of like the reminder. Oh, you know what? It's on the poster. So we'll get into the poster. It's a 4-page document about coffee rationing. Go explore this whole document, especially if you're as passionate about coffee as myself and others are, or like you're really into coffee history, which is a whole other subject. Tons of people are into that. You do not want to miss this point in history. On Thanksgiving Day of 1942, they said, no, you're not allowed. This is some nonsense here. And then when you open it up, the poster's in pristine condition. I'm tempted to get it framed because it's just so fascinating, but I need something where I can turn it around to both sides. But here we get the images of, as the consumer. Now, once you read the bulletin, you're supposed to put it on the wall so the consumer knows what to do. So I'm going to zoom in here. How to use your sugar book. So it's the sugar book, right? Because you had a book about sugar. This is what the ration books, I'm going to bring some up on the screen in a moment here. This is what the ration books look like. So you get this little ration book. Because of wartime shipping shortages, your government is rationing coffee on Thanksgiving. Here is what you do to get your... Can you imagine if you go Thanksgiving shopping and you see this poster on the wall? No coffee for you today. What are you going to do with the pumpkin pie? What? Like, no.
I feel like I would be in jail.
Yeah, I'd be in jail. No. Yeah, I'd be being fine.
They're like, what are you in for? This guy wouldn't give me my coffee.
Oh, I couldn't get some peaches. It was, you're in for peaches? What are you in for? I calculated the chicken cost wrong. Oh, that's hard. That's tough. Oh my gosh.
I missed that decimal point. It was just awful. Now I'm in here for 20 minutes.
I was supposed to charge. I didn't round it the right way. Because they're using more than the 100th of the percent. Come on, like this is getting crazy. But I'm gonna zoom in here so we can enjoy these pictures.
So your coffee rationings was in your sugar book.
It was in your sugar book. You will recognize it as War Ration Book 1, which you have been using for sugar, and then you go to step 2. So here's how you're going to use it. Each coffee stamp, numbers 20 through 28, entitles you to 1 pound, but only if the age shown in the book is 15 years or more. The first stamp, number 27, is valid between November 29th and January 3rd. So you got to time this right. And imagine the time period here. Think about that. The first stamp, number 27, in their example, is good between when they start this, after Thanksgiving, and January 3rd, which means you're only using 1 stamp for all of Christmas, and you're only going to get 1 pound. You got to pace out this during the Christmas holiday now. This is some nonsense. This is some nonsense. Don't detach. See, it's got an arrow there. Don't detach the second stamp, step 28. You're supposed to be using stamp 27 of your sugar book. It leads to the question of, what if you need sugar? Are you already using the sugar book for the sugar? So, and here we have, I love these images though. We have the sample grocer. Now, what studio were they in where they were setting up these photos here? When the coffee on the counter, when buying for your family, buy only as much as you need at the time. Your first coffee stamp is good for 5 weeks. So they're spinning it, right? Oh, it's good for 5 weeks. No, what it should say is you only get 1 pound of coffee for 5 weeks. So make do. Spread your purchases over the whole period. Fresh coffee goes further. Okay.
Well, does it? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that information. Help wanted, I'd say. They're all looking for staff. No one wants to put up with it. Oh, man. Number 4, your grocer will check the age on the book. You may detach the stamp or have your grocer do it. He will sell you 1 pound of coffee on each book showing an age of 15 years or more. And then I love this because we get the image of the Ritz crackers there.
Yeah, that's cool.
Ceiling prices, tea and coffee. Look for ceiling prices. Coffee is a cost of living item, and your grocer must display his ceiling prices. Pay no more. So they've got this list here that's faded.
And
Yeah.
the grocers were not being compensated for the extra work that they were having to do.
No, of course not. No, it's a war
Of course.
effort, Jamie. We need to win the war, okay? Not like ironically, we do need to win the war, but like seriously.
Oh,
yeah. And then 6, stretch your coffee ration. Well, you're gonna have to.
You have no choice.
No matter how you make it, measure carefully. Make only as much as you'll drink. Don't let it boil away. Don't let any coffee go to waste. They understand how important this is. It's probably be some very weak coffee as you're trying to stretch that pound over the. And this is for a whole family, mind you. Right. I'm sure there was a black market for coffee. Remember how like Lou's saving like the cigarette stamps up? They're trying to find a way. I'm sure there are people that didn't drink coffee that were like, all right, I got some coffee over here. I got some left over. I actually have some for Thanksgiving. Like, ooh.
Gotta make friends with the people who don't like coffee.
Gotta make friends, yep. And then they give the definition of what is coffee here for the consumer side. That's why I love this document. It's both your sugar book and what your stamp will buy, which we already went through. Rationing shares alike. Ships that formerly carried coffee are now carrying war materials. Remember, you are asked to give up very little compared with the sacrifices of our fighting men are making. Rationing guarantees you share, price ceilings protect your pocketbook. Obey all wartime regulations loyally. The emphasis on the word loyally. And we get to see the stamp. We get to see the seal here of the OPA. United States of America Office of Price Administration, Washington, D.C. So this comes out in 42 at Thanksgiving. I can forgive Chester Bowles for this because it was Leon Henderson was running things. Hey, remember how the Democrats lost the 42 midterms? I'm just saying, maybe some of them knew this was coming up, and then Leon Henderson wasn't popular, and then he got replaced. I'm wondering if this has something to do with it.
I'm gonna. Just the coffee thing alone.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of like coffee drinking that they did, but I'm sure it was a lot.
Yeah. And then we get into the examples of the actual ration books themselves. So we've already looked at in some of the episodes, it really is.
She's putting on the gloves. She's putting on the gloves.
Yeah. It really is amazing how much the general population subscribed to the cause. Like, we won the war, Was it necessary? Was it not necessary? Well, somebody needs to write some dissertations about all of that. But was the coffee rationing really didn't need to happen? That'd be an interesting study to do. You can spend a whole dissertation on that. We did win. It was something that everybody went along with, or at least the vast majority of people got around with it and got everything done, all jokes aside. So there is that. But man, imagine just the logistics of this system. That's just the retailer side. So what was really interesting is I was over at a place called the Archive over in Lansdale, and ration books, there's a lot of examples of them out there. They actually had one in their ephemera collections. They get things together. So kudos to the guys over at the Archive in Lansdale. And what they had was not only the book, but the pouch for the ration book. So this is the size of the books, and there would be a whole series. It's like literally like a billfold. We can see, it's got its different like little pouches here. And inside, I pulled one out of here earlier, I'm going to cover up the name here because it is somebody else, is the War Ration book. And I'll put an example of this online, and I'll bring one up on the screen. I'm just going to redact out the information about this person. But this is the size. And what's important here is to get an idea of the stamps of themselves. And they are tiny. So when they're saying about torn stamps.
Goodness.
Yeah.
You had to be very careful. Now, this is perforated. So you can tear it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
they got the government seal behind it. I'll put them online so you can see it. There's like an American eagle sort of in blue, running behind it. So they'd be very hard to reproduce. And of course, then they've got sort of military imagery here to remind you, like, hey, it's all for the cause and things like that. So we get those ration books up here. So I thought that's pretty great. We have a tank on one side. We've got a battleship, looks like, got the destroyer on the top, and all of the ones. And this is book after book. They said like ration book 1, ration book 2, ration book 3. We have already the examples of the stamps for gas that we've used before. So we've seen these. which is really, really great, but I wanted people to get a good close-up on what the stamps actually look like. There's also the coins. I don't have an example of a coin at the moment, the red and blue coins. I believe they're made of paper. There's a lot of them online, but that's basically everything. I mean, just operating the logistics of this. And it was gone in 46.
Well, because we discussed, really, we kind of went over more coffee, but so that was applied like to gas, to shoes, to, I mean, well, you didn't have ration books for shoes, but you know, they were rationing like what you could buy,
materials,
right? And then so the only way to really keep track of this was these stamps.
Yeah.
And you couldn't keep a ledger. Like, there's no way that you could. This was the best way to determine whether or not people were buying more than the government felt that they should.
Yeah. And as far as we can tell, the whole system was a success. Imagine, though, I keep trying to think about the brains behind the scenes. They've got to get this going very quickly. And the people that are thinking up how to write the documents to the retailers, we didn't really talk about them, but I mean, the people figuring out the math that they needed to do. The people saying, okay, well, how are we going to make this system work? Okay, well, we're going to make these stamps for a ration book. You know what? We should number them because they're going to try to confuse the stamps. And then certain numbers, so they're game theorying what's going to happen, how people are going to try to get around the system, and they're going to build that into the system. And they're going to have to do that very quickly for a system that never existed before. Or if it did exist before, it wasn't at this exact scale. So, I mean, it's just such a fascinating study into something that's been, like, imagine Sweetie every day. It's something everybody every day of this time period. Rations are going on. It's been mentioned, but the level of how prevalent this is. Sweetie doesn't write in her letters all the time. I went to the store today and I used X. She could have. She's the type that she could have. I used X stamp and then I got my coffee. It's implied this is going on because it's so built into society. Everybody knows it's going on. Only the thing is, like, maybe I can borrow some gas rations from Elizabeth when I go to Philadelphia so we can get up to New York and things like that, or maybe go see DC. She mentions it there. But it's not even mentioned because it's just so commonplace. But we take it for granted because we're just like, oh, yeah, they were doing rations. Price ceilings. I believe one of the candidates was talking about price ceilings. Hey, let's look at this. Before we start talking about price ceilings and rations and things like that, or anything currently, let's look back to here. And there's a lot of scholarship that can be done with it. But I thought this would be a really fun, really big sort of academic sort of look at this with some humor, of course. We did win the war. So
we did win the war.
And
it's an interesting study. It didn't, and again, like, this wasn't a system that was implemented for long.
Yeah,
really, and when the need for it was determined that this wasn't something that was going to be sustainable, then it went away. Yeah. So, I mean, it very quickly came around. It very quickly went away. Yes. And like you said, in the world, we moved on. We lived. No, this was, it was an inconvenience, I think.
Yeah.
Too. But also, I mean, I mean, personally, it's funny to look at this in this time. It was a restriction of people's rights to be able to buy and purchase what they could. Yeah. And that restriction right there, that's something that I think that in our current day and age would not fly as well.
No. And people would find more ways to get around it with the internet and everything else. But those
days, would completely, I think that the rations would be completely ignored by most people. A select few people would use them. But
yeah. Let's think back about no coffee during Thanksgiving 42. Let's appreciate the people that genuinely did care, because despite it all, I do believe that Chester Bowles, at least, was an honest and good person at the head of it all. But think back to 1942, you're going to have to stretch that coffee far. So let's enjoy our good espressos and lattes and raise a mug to them back then. With that, thank you so much for joining us today in our journey in understanding the rationing system of World War II. Bye, everyone.